Hello and welcome to this class. We are going to be looking at perspectives on AI. Now this is a hugely cutting edge field and I've requested a scholar who is an expert in it to come and speak with us. Parul Anand is an AI ethics and policy and governance researcher. She serves as co-lead Team India at For Humanity, advancing responsible AI assurance and audit frameworks aligned with India's data protection and sustainability regimes, and has contributed to India's sovereign AI ecosystem under the India AI mission. Her research focuses on the intersection of AI, climate change, and global justice. She is co-author with Mark Kokelberg of AI, Climate Change and Justice, a normative framework centering the Global South, published in AI and Ethics, which develops a justice-oriented framework for governing the AI climate nexus. I thought that she would be an excellent person to introduce to us social theoretical perspectives on AI. So welcome, Parul.
Hi everyone, good morning. Today we're going to talk about perspectives on artificial intelligence, and we are going to see how it intersects with social theory. And artificial intelligence is, I'm sure, not new to anyone. Whether you're interacting with it visibly or invisibly, it's definitely in our lives. Be it a chatbot like ChatGPT that you're interacting with, or be it more subtle when you go on Amazon and you're getting those predictive nudges. That is something that we're going to explore, how artificial intelligence is making its way in society, how it's restructuring society as we know it, humanity as we know it, and how it's introducing new relationships and new power dynamics that is having really massive considerations for how we proceed as a society and as individual as well. So before we even begin a discussion around AI and society and everything that entails, I think we should just first start with what AI means, because that is where the problem emerges when you start defining AI as separate from society, as separate from politics. So we'll take the definition from EU's AI Act as a reference, which speaks that an AI system means a machine-based system that is designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy and that may exhibit adaptiveness after deployment, and that for explicit or implicit objectives infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. What is important in this context, however, is to note that AI as a system is always connected to other systems such as cloud and ecologies and natural environments. This interconnected definition of AI is what has been noted by Kate Crawford and is what has been noted by Mark Kokelberg in his work that I also contributed to around climate justice and AI. That is to place AI in this larger interconnected context, and that is where we start the discussion on. So when we start discussing the relationship between AI and society, what we need to understand is that it's twofold. AI impacts society, however, society in turn also affects AI. It is a force of its own that has emerged. AI cannot exist if not for a society. It exists in that context. It is born of that context and will be deployed in that context. So let's get deeper into how firstly AI affects society, AI as an actor. The first thing we need to discuss and start with is how AI is redefining what it even means to be human anymore. So it is really affecting these fields of ontology, phenomenology, and hermeneutics. Ontology is the study of defining things, of existence itself. Phenomenology is how we experience things. Hermeneutics is then the study of making meaning. Now what AI is doing is, it's affecting society at such a fundamental level and humanity at such a fundamental level that we are under an ontological threat. What does it mean to be intelligent anymore? When you look at the definition of AI itself, it comes from this, right? It comes from this fact that it is an antithesis to human intelligence, artificial intelligence. So in that way, you see AI applications, they are quite good at mimicking human intelligence and reasoning. It's an intelligent machine. So what it's introducing is questions around what it means to be creative anymore. When AI creates artwork and you look at AI art and human art, deep discussions emerge around what it means to be creative, what it means to be imaginative. And then you see AI writing poems or writing research papers, then you start wondering what it means to be intelligent anymore. So now what's starting to happen is these very core ways that we define humanity, and we define concepts such as creativity, intelligence, cognition, consciousness. All of these are becoming not as consistent anymore, not as rigid anymore as they were before, and that's creating quite a fundamental shift in how we perceive the world, how we experience the world. Well, do you experience AI art differently than you experience human art? What happens when you find out that it's not human art? There are studies which show that once people find out that it is it is machine art and not human art, they start rating it less differently. So how people make experience things is also getting affected by AI. It can be adverse, it can be positive. There are thought directions in both ways. Then we look at meaning making. A lot of the ways that we make sense of the world depends on consistency. Well, what is a pen to you is a pen to me. Well, now what is real to you might not be real to me anymore because of AI, because it starts challenging what it means to be real anymore. When you look at the discussions around deepfakes, it's becoming more and more difficult to differentiate and distinguish and discern if the person in front of you is real anymore. Now that becomes even more difficult when you apply it to, like, it has great considerations when you apply it to political context. When people have seen deep fakes of political leaders with massive sort of incitement of violence or propagandistic activities, which can be really insightful, and then it becomes really hard to assign any accountability or liability on any actors. So that is how we start discussing that AI itself is a fundamentally disruptive technology, which makes us question what is real anymore, what is human anymore. So then when you are struggling to define what it means to be human anymore, of course, then what society means and what collective means is also becoming threatened. And it's just a part of this individual sort of anxieties around consistency and meaning making that can be put down and be reflecting on the larger fractal of collective meaning making, and then can lead to hysteria and delusions and anarchy and a lot more things. So that is the first way that AI affects society, as in, well, we don't know what's real anymore, we don't know what it means to be human anymore, and we are navigating a world, a post-AI world, where people are not quite sure where we fully stand. So then this is the bedrock of how AI and society starts, that it fractures, or it at least challenges the fundamental assumptions about society as a whole. So now from that bedrock we start discussing more things. Okay, we understand that this is how the bedrock is. Now what happens when we bring in the discussions around material? Okay, what happens when you happens with, like, let's take it from a more conceptual level to the most material reality that there is, Earth. And now this is very, very important, because a lot of times what can happen is technology starts getting discussed as divorced from the material realm, and that is where a lot of problems have arisen, where you see climate change and extractivism, and there's also thoughts around environmental colonialism, this extractive pattern where technology and its development becomes completely divorced from the material reality that it brings. And it's also because of this gap between how the layperson perceives the device in their hand and what actually creates it, the labor chain that comes through it, the injustices that come. It's quite material, it's made of the earth. However, that is not very obvious when it comes to AI for the lay people. But regardless, this is very, very important to understand and realize, because AI is deeply material. And so, to quote one of the great scholars in this field, Kate Crawford, AI is neither artificial nor intelligent. So let's take the first bit of this. It's not artificial at all. It's as natural as it gets. There's semiconductors, which require chips. It requires silicon. It requires rare earth minerals. And when you look at data centers, well, what do they require? They require heaps of water for data center cooling. Then we require tons of electricity. All of that is material. So now we need to understand that this technology is, changing the ecology that as we see it. And now that ecology, the change of ecology is never politically or socially neutral. Where this change occurs and how it occurs, who are the actors, really is introducing great injustice and great inequalities in AI development and deployment. When you look at data center development, you'll see a lot of data centers being placed in Latin American or global south context where water scarcity is already at its high. Or you look at US, you look at Virginia where it's you'll see Arizona where water scarcity has been high, but then the more and more toll is put in these areas because of this incessant development of data centers. And then that is never a politically neutral question. Because at the end of the day, the answer is the water. Where does it go to the municipal drinking requirements or to the development of the data center? And then, of course, what can happen is then the water becomes more expensive for the residents around the area. There's heat pollution, there's noise pollution that these data centers come. Not to talk about the labor concerns that do arise, which we'll cover more later. But that is one of the ways how the water consumption of AI introduces deep water inequality concerns. And so what is important here to realize that this extraction or utilization of material resources of the earth always intersects with climate justice concerns. We are not AI development exists in that context, and the inequities between global south and global north have to be considered. Now we have to be really careful in these definitions because AI and concerns around, let's say, AI colonialism or that extractive pattern and dispossession is not as easy to apply anymore because the actors have changed. China has emerged at a greater power in AI development. India is also developing a lot. So the categories of global north and global south, as conceptualized in traditional climate justice literature, might not be very applicable anymore in the AI context. However, the pattern of dispossession and extraction, especially in an environmental colonialism context, is definitely present when we start talking about AI and climate and justice concerns. Now, another really important thing that we need to consider when we start discussing about AI and climate and the societal and justice considerations that it brings up is the concern around using AI for climate. As in, one of the things that I did talk about is that AI can also affect society positively. So one of those applications is how we could use AI in a way that's materially beneficial for the earth. Now, you'll see a lot of AI for good applications, and of course they have their own benefits and they can be quite revolutionary in their application. However, they also bring a lot of social concerns. Firstly is the age-old questions of the Anthropocene, the idea that humans should just stop doing anything for climate change and be as non-interfering as possible, because the more you interfere, the worse it might get. So that is a consideration when you start using AI to solve climate change problems. Now, this becomes even more politically sensitive when you start using AI to take decisions around climate adaptation as a tool of decision making. Then concerns around democracy emerge, because AI, as we'll see later, is not developed in a manner that is usually fair, and it can bypass these democratic systems that we have built. But then when you use such a technology to make such decisions for climate, then the questions of liberties the question of autonomy and everything emerge that we also need to be quite considerate around. When these technologies are deployed, the way they're deployed also bring a lot of social considerations. So that is the discussion around how AI affects society on a material ecological level. Then we shift more. So now we can cover like the very basic of, oh, it's reconceptualizing how we see everything, the reality itself. Then we see, oh, it's also changing a lot around the material plane, the earth and the trees and the resources. Now we shift to people. Now this is a very, very important area of when you start discussing about AI, because AI is nothing without people. So in order to start this discussion, we also need to go a little bit on how AI is developed. So AI is developed by training on a lot of data. And what is that data? A lot of data is just people. People and their faces, where they live, what do they do, what do they like. All of these things just connect to data, which then is trained on. And then the AI makes connections, and then you can have applications such as on the basis of the data that it was trained on. On the basis of this data of people, it makes decisions that directly affect people. One of the biggest examples is around facial recognition technology. AI is being used around the globe to give out traffic tickets. In fact, AI is also being used by some judges to predict recidivism of some inmates. So when you use AI to take such critical decisions around justice, around liberty, around crime, and also employment, that's where the problem comes in. Because when these technology is developed on data sets that are inherently biased, and they're biased because of society and how it exists currently, and then you put and make decisions from this technology on that flawed paradigm, it creates and perpetuates these injustices. It creates a lock-in. And this is where the biggest concern around AI comes from. The question of bias and the questions of algorithmic oppression. The reason why this is quite a big issue is because of something that thinkers have characterized as politics of classification. AI algorithms and dataset training is inherently classificatory. Either this gets in or it doesn't get out. Something either is represented or it's not. Sometimes a lot of people are not represented enough, or sometimes some people are represented too much. All of these can create biased outcomes, and bias can be in a lot of forms. Bias can emerge on the basis of race, it can emerge on the basis of caste, it can emerge on the basis of gender, it can emerge on the basis of economic inequality, it can emerge on the basis of education, it can emerge on the basis of geography. I mean, the considerations and hierarchies are as numerous as they already exist in society currently. And algorithms are no exception. In fact, they perpetuate this lock-in by making sure that the decisions that are made on these data sets become like a self-enforcing loop. And as I pointed out, these sort of decisions can be life-changing and life-threatening in some cases, especially when you look at health data. Certain people of color or women are historically underrepresented in health data and can have much less accuracy rates, which can really determine their access to healthcare. AI algorithms are also being used in immigration context, whether to let in the refugee context comes into the picture. And all of this politics of classification, because of the very nature of AI as a technology itself, can bring in and perpetuate these injustices. Now, questions emerge around representation. Well, when you're using AI technology in politically charged context, you need to be democratic. You need to make sure these people are represented. However, that's not always the case. And the very, very difficult question emerges then, then what is the right level of representation? And that is a political question, and it's not a question that developers should be solving or is able or equipped to solve. So the lines between social scientists and pure tech developers or pure scientists are slowly blurring day by day because of the interconnected nature of this technology. And another thing that we need to consider when we talk about people and AI is the loss of context. Now what happens is, essentially because AI, data has to be fed in a very specific and a standardized format, and whatever it is, it cannot capture the entire context that surrounds something. A last name is rarely a last name, and in the Indian context, it's a caste denoter. However, it will show up as just a data point in the AI development system, divorced from its largest social context. And that is why concerns have emerged where ChatGPT has been shown to autocorrect a last name and introduce caste considerations. So that is where, when you start looking at data or AI outputs as divorced from this, there is this loss of context that happens. AI, however good it is, however good it replicates, even in the case of art or creativity, it's divorced from the social context of art that comes in. And when this context is separated, when this context cannot also be actually represented or captured in these technologies, however, that is still being used to make decisions, still being used in everyday life, there is a flatlining and there is a dispossession that comes up. And this is this dispossession that has also been discussed in the data colonialism or tech colonialism context, where tech is seen as an actor which dispossesses people of their identity, this dispossesses people of culture, of richness. And this is something that AI is seen to perpetuate. Timnit Gebru's paper with Emily Bender and more discussed this problem quite early on. Being a very strong voice in the AI ethics community, she speaks, contrary to how it may seem when we observe its output, an LLM is a system for haphazardly stitching together sequences of linguistic forms it has observed in its vast training data, according to probabilistic information about how they combine, but without any reference to meaning, a stochastic parrot. Timnit emphasizes and points out this exact tyranny of loss of context, which AI does and which can create injustices. Then we talk about standardization and the questions of scale and non-localization. So the essence of AI, for something to be replicable, something to be, general and, perform cross context wise, it has to be standardized in a very certain way for it to be machine readable or AI trainable. Now what that does is, it takes away the richness of data, and then again the questions of representation come in, because a lot of forms of knowledge are just not, let's say, AI translatable or AI readable. So then knowledges such as indigenous or traditional knowledge or oral cultures or visual mediums, these sort of plural mediums are not represented or captured by AI. It standardizes, it creates an erasure by this sort of forced homogenization that comes just to get culture to fit tech. And that is driven by a lot of values around political economy that informs AI development. Because the more standardized it is, the more replicable it is. The more non-local it is, the more area it covers, and then of course more economically profitable, and then more reach and access. So the very ethos that is driving AI development and deployment right now can largely be seen driven by these considerations. And then the design of the technology itself perpetuates and creates these new form of injustices, where certain voices which have always been excluded remain excluded, and then that exclusion becomes locked in as AI entrenches itself more and more in how we live, how we make decisions, and especially political considerations, and how much it's happening that AI is becoming increasingly used in justice context, in political decision context, in aid, in digital public goods. So that is where the design of the technology and the flatlining and the erasure of context and the classification that it performs are not politically neutral design architectures. They can act as tools of oppression, tools of dispossession. And that is something that we really need to consider when we consider AI and people. Now, more around the part around people. Another thing that's very, very important here is that the question of labor. Now, when you see who develops AI and who benefits from it, there's rarely an overlap. The labor concerns that have emerged from AI have been very concerning. Large amount of labor has been taken from global south. People are working minimum wage conditions and performing this ghost working jobs where they're labeling highly emotionally damaging, violent imagery to perform this task of labeling the image to train these AI models, being paid quite less. And then the deployment can be then seen in better, more affluent global north context. And people who are benefiting are really not the people who are providing the labor. And that is where we also segue into the question of power from people. What happens there is large resource inequity that comes in development and deployment of AI. If AI was a technology which was deployed in context where people's lives were not at stake, where people's liberties were not at stake, the question of who develops it or who benefits from it could become perhaps a neutral one. However, it is hard to imagine that because all technology exists in that political context, but especially AI. However, in this case, we must become very, very conscious of the power that exists around AI. A great book on this is The Empire of AI by Karen Hao, who really goes into discussions around AI colonialism. Because one of the things that we also need to consider is AI as a resource, AI as a geopolitical resource. Access to AI determines where you stand in the world, how much political leverage you have, how much developmental leverage you could obtain. And that is why access to AI and development and deployment could also become a justice and equity consideration. However, there's compute inequalities. It is not equally spread. So not everyone is positioned to develop AI in an equal manner. And not everyone is bearing the cost that AI's adverse effects come when it's being developed or deployed, such as the climate cost, such as the labor cost, such as these justice concerns. These are not equally distributed, and they can be seen to perpetuate the earlier exploitative dynamics that already exist. That is where the consideration around power emerges. Another thing that we really need to recognize is how it's developed and deployed. It's not a technology that is developed with the people. It might be deployed in a democratic context to make these decisions, but it rarely is democratic because it's not participatory. The design itself is very top down. It's some people in quite a remote context developing the technology which are not working with people on the ground who are the most affected by the technology. So though discussions around participatory AI have emerged, it is still yet to be seen on a larger context, and most of the AI in development right now is dominated by this one-way top-down sort of approach, which creates deep power inequities, especially around market. It creates this disparity on who bears the risks of AI developments or deployments, failures and accountabilities, and who benefits from it. Another thing that we also must consider is the algorithmic black box. Now, this is a big concern in AI ethics and AI community in general, the idea of explainability and transparency. So, the idea of black box is that for a layman, it is not possible to know why the AI came to the decision that it came to. The idea is you can't ask it to show the work, and that creates this black box where you just get a decision, you just get an answer. However, you can't understand it, let alone even question it, which creates procedural justice concern, fairness concern. Another piece that also emerged around the power and AI dynamic is the piece around technofascism. Since AI is being used in charged political context, a big piece here is the potential of AI in surveillance. This connects with data and the connection with surveillance, which have already been observed. Targeted and customized messaging has become easier than ever. With deepfakes, it's not easy to know what is real or what is not. As more and more people are entering interactions with AI, the psyches have never been more vulnerable of the masses to an influence before. We have already seen how technology can influence voter dynamics and electoral democracy in the case of Cambridge Analytica. With AI, everything is meant to just accelerate more with these design architectures. So that is something we must also become conscious of, where you can also see with this power dynamics and unequal actors, where you can see a confluence of political actors and corporate actors coming together and deploying AI in a way that takes away people's liberties. We really need to understand that technology AI is a deeply socio-political material system. It's not just technology. Mark Zuckerberg talks about AI and political philosophy, and recently in his paper he discusses technofascism and AI's potential for it. He speaks that more generally, while there is no such thing as fascist technologies in the sense that there would be an explicit link between the technology and fascism as an ideology or movement, and while these effects are often not intended, some features of current digital technologies and infrastructures enable and support fascist tendencies on the basis of their technical features and possibilities. They are hence not fascism neutral in this sense. Now we'll move on to how society affects AI. So as I remarked earlier, it's a two-way relationship. AI cannot exist without society. AI did not emerge prior to society. The data sets that emerge only capture inequalities that already exist. In that way, we must admit the danger of assigning political responsibility on developers. They are merely capturing inequality, though they do have responsibility of not perpetuating and locking it in and exacerbating it. The problem precedes AI. There already exists pattern of economic inequality in the world, and that is why some actors had better access to development of AI. They had better access to compute, and they could, establish this sort of supply chains. A lot of work has already also been done on connecting colonialism and AI development, or connecting economic oppression and inequality with AI development. So these things already exist. AI is just revealing and is a fractal of a society that is already deeply fractured. Colonial histories have already existed. Environmental exploitation and climate change has already existed. Fascist tendencies exist. Caste and racial hierarchies exist. So when AI is developed, it merely captures that. But because we use AI in a manner that can create these politically sensitive decisions, that can create a lock-in should they not be remedied and should they not be actively addressed. However, this is something that we must become really conscious around. AI itself is a neutral tool. However, its development and deployment is never neutral. It comes alive with the data that you put it in it. The principle of garbage in and garbage out is very important in AI development. The quality of output completely depends on the quality of its input. AI comes alive with the people who develop it, people who use it, and the society it exists in. It is not completely free from accountability. We must become quite conscious because its design and deployment can introduce new forms of inequality. However, it is conforming to things that do already exist. Another thing that we also have to acknowledge is how cyclical this becomes, is rife with its inequalities and injustices. AI develops in that context. Now, AI as a tool, because it was developed in that context, and that is why considering AI in the context of social theory is absolutely critical. I would urge everyone here to connect what we have discussed today to what you have studied before around power, around people, around race, around caste, around geography. We must stop defining AI and largely all technology as neutral, something divorced and something extremely technical, which exists absolutely different from these contexts that the entire rest of society is submerged in. I hope today's lecture provided some insights and reflections and started your thinking in this direction. So, thank you.